Welcome to the Everyday Dan podcast, where we embark on a bite-sized journey of curiosity and discovery into the myriad of fascinating topics that I am passionate about. I'm your host, Dan, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this adventure as we learn new things together. Welcome back to yet another episode. So, over the past couple years, different YouTubers I follow have done lists which are titled to the effect things like 10 things I can't live without, 10 things I use every day, 10 things I utilize on a daily basis, things like that. People like Siers, Peter McKinnon, Taylor Martin, or Jocko Willink. And these were always super cool. Some of them were also very unrealistic financially, but I had fun watching them, even if I'm never going to own some of the things in them anyway, because it's just kind of cool to look at. But I decided too that I was like, I'm going to talk about my own list of 10 things. Now, here's the thing. If you paid attention to the episode title, you will probably have seen the asterisk next to can't. And that's because in reality, I could live without any of these things. If you took them from the I'm not going to die or something like that, I may not be as efficient, but I'm still going to get the job done. Now, however, again, these are things that I find pretty valuable in my day-to-day routines. And I mentioned Jocko Willink. He says 10 things I utilize on a regular basis. So kind of similar to that. I know I repeated myself, but I do repeat myself. And so these are the top 10 things I use during the fall and winter. Now, you may ask, well, Dan, it's almost spring. Why are you doing that? And it's like, well, that's because I've gone through the fall and winter. And now that spring is upon us, I'm going to be shifting gears a little bit. What I use will probably adjust a bit too. And then possibly, at the end of the summer, maybe I'll do another top, 10 things I can't live without for the spring and summer. Now, also too, just going to, make the point too, and I've said this in lists before, this is not necessarily done in order of priority or significance. This is just kind of as I put it kind of thing. So if you're like, well, why isn't this number one? Why isn't this? And that's why. It's not necessarily in one particular order. But if we jump into it, then one of the number one, the first thing on my list that I used in the fall and winter is a hat. And the reason being is, those people that listen to this and know me will realize that I am follically challenged. I have no hair, and so therefore my head gets very cold. But also in the same sense, I have a tendency, I get ear infections every winter, and wearing a hat helps to reduce that exposure to stuff, getting in my ears and everything. So I try and do that. I have two hats. One is, I think, over a decade old. It's like an Under Armour hat, something like that. It's been washed. It's, the X logo is still looking kind of grimy. Maybe I'll drop it in some RIT dye or something like that to try and just completely black it out. And that way I won't even have to worry about it looking dirty. Who knows? And then the other one's like a $5 knit cap I bought from Walmart. They're both really good. The knit cap is super warm, which is very helpful. And so I like having that on me. It does make day-to-day stuff significantly better kind of thing. So that's the number one thing. Number two is my Bible. So the importance of it is I believe it's really important to be in the Word of God every single day, studying, journaling through, praying about it, praying what you read. And I think it's very important, very relevant. So I am utilizing my Bible every single day. I think it's, again, very, very important. If you are a believer, you should be in the Word of God every day. I journal through, the scriptures every morning. I've kind of talked about my devotional habits and how that works before, so I'm not going to go too far into that detail again, but needless to say, it's a very relevant thing. So the number 3 item on my list is kind of a catch-all, and that's my Kindle / a book I'm reading or audiobooks. I lump them all together because people will argue, and there's all kinds of debates, but honestly, I use them all interchangeably. A lot of times I'll be listening to an audiobook, I'll get home, I'll just pick up from the physical book or an ebook version of whatever I was listening to. So that way I can kind of concurrently be, going through a book, and I don't have to stop and wait till I get to a certain time point. And also too, it's very helpful, especially like Kindle. I have the Kindle app on my phone rather than going through and reading like Facebook or something when I'm in line at the grocery store. I could read a page or two of whatever book I'm working on. And so I think it's really important. One of my goals this year was to read 50 books. And so I'm pretty much always reading every single day. At some point or another, I'm in a book at some point, sometimes multiple books, because I read one or two, sometimes three at the same time, and I kind of switch around them. So that's number 3. So number 4 is my phone. Now, here's the thing. I wish I could live without my phone, because I do actually hate my phone. Now, literally, I did just say I use it for audiobooks and Kindles and stuff. Yeah, those are the purposes, but there's still a lot of drawbacks to technology. I'm very mixed on how useful it is. I have seen many people, hanging out with people, and they're just hanging out. They're just kind of putzing on their phone while I'm talking, or we're all hanging out. I'm like, what's going on? Come on. Because I think it's really important to be present and be in the moment. And I think smartphones, in a general sense, prevent that. They really damage being able to be close to people. And so it's a love-hate relationship. I use mine every day because I use it for GPS a lot. Yes, I do audiobooks and Spotify and stuff like that. That's nice. But the thing is, too, is if I didn't have those things on my phone, I'd be fine. The maps is a little bit more necessary, but you know what? I just have to work on improving my ability to read a physical map if I had to. So there's that. So that's number 4. Number 5 is a knife. And here's the thing. Some people are going to be like, what do you mean? Why do you need to carry a knife? And I've had people that are like, why are you wearing a knife? Are you going to stab someone? No. The knife that you just saw in my pocket is my pocket knife. I use it for cutting food, for opening mail, like packages, letters, that kind of stuff. Nothing as crazy as like self-defense or something like that. Really, that's it. If we're going to go using a knife for self-defense, I have I have a very specific knife that I have that is a concealed knife that no one will ever see. That is the stabby one. But that's not one anyone's ever going to see, because again, I don't pull that out for just anything. That's very specific, and I've never been in a situation where I needed to utilize it, and hopefully I never will be. But I think it's an important tool. Again, I use mine 4 or 5 times a day or more. It's a super helpful thing to have on hand. Sometimes it's like I'm out and someone's like, hey, I need to open a package. Boom, there you go. So there's a lot of utilitarian purposes to that. Now, if we go into continue with the utilitarian, that was, number 5 is the knife. Number 6 is a multi-tool. And so there is a slight amount of overlap with a knife and a multi-tool, because a lot of multi-tools do have a knife blade on them. It's not going to be as ergonomic, and so it's going to be a little bit different there. It may not necessarily feel the same way. But it's a very utilitarian thing. A lot of people were like, well, just carry a tool or a toolbox with you, which is true. I do carry a toolbox with me in my car. There's a full toolbox in my trunk with a multi-tool in it also. And the reason being is, there are going to be times when you have time to grab that toolbox, but then there's also going to be times where you don't have time to. And it's what you have on you. And so a lot of times the tool you have on you is the best tool. So having a tool that can kind of handle a bunch of different things is really helpful. I'm talking about this literally earlier. I was over at my in-laws fixing a cabinet and everything. I used my multi-tool the whole way through. And you know what? That cabinet looks pretty good afterwards. So there's a lot of different purposes. There's a lot of different types of multi-tools out there. Same with knives. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, go spend hundreds of dollars on a knife. Because I've definitely gone down that rabbit hole, and I would discourage anyone else to say, don't do that. Don't go down the rabbit hole. Try and just go with, if you can, go with something really cheap, budget friendly. You don't need to really invest a whole lot. If you're really into it down the road, maybe think about it, but you don't need to right off the bat. You shouldn't worry about it. And as well, jumping back to the knife thing, if you're in high school or something like that, maybe don't necessarily grab a knife. If you're homeschooled, maybe the context is going to be a little bit different. You're not going to, but if you're going to private or a public school, please don't take a knife into school. That's not going to go well. You might get away with a multi-tool, but even then, be careful. But those are the things too. And even with multi-tools, you can go, I think I was on Walmart, just out of curiosity, checking out on Walmart, you can get Gerber multi-tool for like 30 some bucks. And that's gonna do you just fine. It'll work just fine. Piece of cake kind of thing. So, and it's a very utilitarian. I always have my knife and my multi-tool on me, either in my pocket or very close to me in a bag or something like that. But most often, it's going to be on my person. Now, number 7 on my list is a pen and a notebook. I have a little folio thing that is in my pocket. It's kind of like a wallet / notebook cover. And inside it, I have a little, I think it's like an Amazon brand notebook. I got like a pack of 6 or 7 or something a while back. Still working through that. And it's really important. A lot of times I jot down lists. I put down ideas. I have podcast ideas that go into that. But one of the main drivers for that is, in work and personal life, a lot of times if I'm with some especially older individuals and they tell me something that I find relevant, or I want to look something, I'm like, oh, I should look that up. I will go through and write it down on my notebook, and I'll kind of go through and have that in there, because it is significantly more respectful if you're just pulling up a notebook and you're writing it down there, as opposed to going through and pulling up your phone. Because if you pull up your phone, it's going to look like you could be doing a ton of different things, and it can come across as disrespectful, even if that's not really your intent. So you really want to be thinking about that. Also, too, again, my notebook doesn't have a battery that dies. It's going to keep functioning long after my phone is dead. And so it's very helpful in that thing. Also, too, writing on a regular basis is really a good habit to develop. Just jotting down notes, all kinds of different things. Very helpful to have and to do, kind of thing. Now, we go on to kind of continuing in the same vein of, my phone could do this, but this is a bit better to have a watch. Yes, people are going to be like, I can just pull my phone out and look at it. You can. But it's a little bit more obvious if you're talking with someone and you want to know a time and you pull out your phone and look at that. They're gonna totally know what you're doing. As opposed to with a watch, I can quick glance at my watch really easily, and there's a lot of benefit to that. Now, I typically shift between either my smartwatch or I have a G-Shock of some kind. Listen, these things are amazing. If you can get a G-Shock, someone gives you one, take good care of it, because that is going to last you a long time. And they're sturdy, they're simple, they're going to work. And it's very helpful. Now, the smartwatch that I use, really my biggest reason is it's very helpful to have my reminders pop up on it. But I really like it for my fitness tracking. It's very helpful for that. That way I can track my workouts, things like that. If I'm doing a competition with someone working out wise, I can kind of be checking in on that, see how they're doing point wise. If I need to squeeze in another workout, very helpful. But if you're just looking at a watch, you can just go get a watch for $10-$20, and that is going to serve you just fine. Now, granted, I have friends who wear watches that are literally falling apart. And I'm like, why don't you just go get another cheap watch that's literally falling off your wrist? And they are too stubborn to get it. But you know what? That's okay. That's entirely up to them. Now that's number 8. Now number 9 is a flashlight. Again, you totally can say, oh, my phone has a flashlight mode. Yes, it does. But it's not really as useful, as helpful as having a dedicated flashlight. Or if you're over in the UK, a torch. I think that sounds way cooler to say. I'm going to pull out my torch. But it's very helpful too. I use a flashlight once or twice a day. A lot of times it's in the evenings if I'm going around the house checking, make sure all the doors are locked and everything. It's easier just using the flashlight to look at just the lock rather than turning on lights and everything. As well as, I can use a lower brightness setting. It's not quite as strong on my eyes when I have to get up in the middle of the night because the cat decided to barf on the floor and I have to look for it, make sure that nobody steps in it. Flashlight's very helpful for that. Or maybe I'm looking under a piece of furniture at something. there's a number of different purposes, and same thing budget wise. You know, there are people out there I see, they're like, oh yeah, I bought this flashlight, it was like $400. I'm like, that's ridiculous. You can go to the store and you can buy like a $5, $10, $15 flashlight, and that's going to serve you just fine. Now, and so that's number 9. Now, number 10 is a water bottle. You always want to stay hydrated in every season, even winter. Some people are like, oh, it's really cold. It's still important. I try and drink about a gallon of water every day. Throughout the course of the day, I don't like chug a whole bunch. It's like throughout the course of the day, I'm trying to drink water. I have 2 different water bottles. I have a Yeti water bottle that's really nice for keeping my water cold, and it's got a nice little smaller spout, and that's helpful. It's about 18 ounces. And then I have a 32-ounce Nalgene that I'm very happy with because I found it for $1 at a Salvation Army, and I'm going to tell you right now, that's a pretty good steal right there. I was pretty happy about that. And it has a little insert in it that basically means that when I drink from it, it's not going to like dump a whole bunch on me. And so, really important to stay hydrated. If you play sports, obviously you're going to know the importance of this, but even in your daily life, it's really relevant. It's good for your health. It's even good for weight loss. I think I mentioned before, staying hydrated, but it's very good to do that. So that's my top 10 things I can't live without. Again, it's a bit general. I didn't really talk about too many specific brands, mostly because everyone's going to be a bit different, and also because I'm not going to necessarily espouse something really expensive, because I've talked about saving your money and everything. Think budget wise, and also to think about what you necessarily need. You're not necessarily going to have the same kind of needs or use cases that I do. Everyone is very different in what they have, what they use on a regular basis. Now, here's the thing. I have some honorary mentions. So, one of those honorary mentions that could fit into this list, I chose not to, was like my headphones. I do use my headphones almost every day, but I don't always have them with me. They're very helpful when I do use them. That way I can listen to music or background sounds and everything when I'm working, something like that. My tablet gets an honorary mention just because I do use it on a semi-regular basis, but again, I can take it or leave it. I don't really need it necessarily. So there's a lot of different things, but you're going to think about what you need on a regular basis. What are you using? And here's the thing. If you want to comment on what your top 10 thing is, I'm going to include a little feedback box, either Spotify or YouTube. You can comment on the video on YouTube. On Spotify, you can just use the little comment box. I'd love to hear what you guys have, what you guys use. To be just a kind of, what are you using on a regular basis? But thanks for stopping in. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you next week for the next video.